Kai didn't realize how loud silence could get until it started answering him back. That night, the apartment didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a paused moment in time, like the world outside had kept moving, but someone had pressed stop on his life and forgotten to restart it. The ceiling fan creaked with a slow, uneven rhythm. Each rotation sounded slightly different, like even the machine was losing motivation. The bulb above him flickered once, twice, then held steady, casting a pale yellow glow over everything that felt too small for the weight inside him. Kai sat cross-legged on the floor, back against the wall, knees pulled close to his chest. His phone lay face down beside him like something abandoned. It hadn't rung in hours, or maybe days. He couldn't remember anymore. Time had stopped behaving properly. He wasn't thinking in sentences anymore. Just fragments. Rent due. No job. No replies. Too tired. Why keep going? That last thought didn't shock him the way it used to. That was the dangerous part. It didn't feel like a dramatic question anymore. It felt normal. Outside, a car horn echoed faintly. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. Life continued in pieces he no longer belonged to. Kai stood up slowly, not because he decided to, but because sitting too long started to hurt in a different way. His legs were stiff, his body slower than his thoughts. He walked to the tiny kitchen. Opened the fridge. Empty. Not metaphorically. Literally. Just a bottle of water, half warm, sitting in the corner like it had given up trying to be useful. He closed the door again. There was no frustration. No anger. Just acceptance. And that scared him more than anything else. Because acceptance meant he was no longer fighting it. He leaned against the counter and stared at nothing. His life hadn't always been like this. That was the part his mind kept trying to remind him of, like a cruel joke. There had been moments before this. He remembered school, not fondly, but clearly. He had stopped attending regularly after things at home started falling apart. No one really noticed at first. Teachers assumed he was going through a phase. Friends stopped asking questions after a while. It was easier that way. Easier to disappear slowly than all at once. By the time anyone realized he was gone academically, he had already built a life outside of structure. Small jobs. Temporary work. Cash in hand. No expectations. At first, it felt freeing. No deadlines. No pressure. No grades defining him. But freedom without direction slowly becomes drift. And drift doesn't feel like falling at first. It feels like floating. Kai had been floating for years. Until now. He returned to the floor, sitting again as if the apartment had claimed him. "I should be doing something," he said quietly. The words sounded strange in the room, like they didn't belong to him anymore. But he didn't move. That contradiction had become his routine. Knowing and not doing. Understanding and avoiding. Seeing and still ignoring. His mind drifted again, uninvited, to the past few months. The warehouse job. It wasn't anything special. Long aisles of stacked boxes, the smell of cardboard and metal, the constant beep of scanning machines. It was repetitive work, predictable, mechanical. That was why he had taken it. Predictability meant less thinking. The manager hadn't been cruel. Just indifferent. Kai had been one of many workers rotating through shifts, each person replaceable, each task divisible. He had liked that at first. Being replaceable meant no pressure to be exceptional. But replaceability has a limit. And when efficiency drops, systems don't hesitate. You're being let go. No explanation beyond that. No argument worth having. Just a paper, a nod, and a door that didn't close loudly enough to match the moment. Kai remembered walking home that day and feeling strangely light. Not relieved, just detached. Like something had been removed from him, but he didn't know what yet. It took weeks to realize it wasn't just a job. It was structure. Routine. A reason to wake up. Without it, days stopped having edges, everything blurred. He had tried, at first, to fix it. Applied to places. Checked listings. Updated a resume he barely understood how to write anymore. But rejection has a rhythm of its own. First it feels external. Then it starts feeling personal. Then it becomes expectation. After a while, Kai stopped opening emails. Stopped checking responses. Stopped trying to interpret silence as anything other than finality. That was how he ended up here. In this room. In this stillness. In this version of himself that didn't feel like a version at all. It felt like the final draft no one edited. He rubbed his face slowly, palms dragging over tired skin. Okay, he whispered, not to anyone. Not even to himself, really. Just into the air. It wasn't a decision yet. It wasn't hope. It was something smaller. Acknowledgement. The night deepened. The city outside softened into distant hums. Somewhere far away, music played through thin walls. Life continued without permission. Kai lay down on the floor instead of the bed. The bed felt too intentional. Too hopeful. The floor matched his mood better. His eyes stayed open for a long time. Not thinking. Just existing. And somewhere between exhaustion and awareness, something shifted, not dramatically, not visibly. Just enough to create a crack in the loop. A thought appeared that wasn't self-pity. Wasn't despair. Just observation. I can't stay like this. It didn't feel powerful. It felt obvious. Like noticing the sky is above you. But obvious truths, when finally accepted, change direction more than dramatic ones ever do. Morning arrived without announcement. Light seeped through the curtain edges, soft and indifferent. Kai didn't sleep properly. Or maybe he did and just didn't notice. His body felt heavier than the day before, but his mind was slightly less fogged. Hunger made itself known in a dull, persistent way. This time, he didn't ignore it. He stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, like restarting a machine that hadn't been used in a while. He drank water. Cold this time, he must have refilled it without remembering. Then he did something he hadn't done in days. He got dressed properly. Not for comfort. Not for sleep. For outside. The world beyond his door didn't feel welcoming. It felt neutral. And neutrality was better than hostility. The street was already awake when he stepped out. People moved with direction. Some fast, some slow, but all with somewhere to go. Kai noticed how everyone seemed to belong to something, even if temporary. A job. A place. A purpose for the moment. He walked without direction at first. Just letting his feet decide. The air carried the smell of food carts, exhaust, and morning heat beginning to build. The city was neither kind nor cruel. It simply was. After some time, he stopped near a small construction site. He didn't plan to. He just stood there, watching. Workers moved with rhythm, lifting, measuring, adjusting. There was no performance in it. No audience. Just function. Something about it anchored him. Not admiration. Recognition. Effort turned into structure. Structure turned into result. A simple chain he had been missing. He stood there longer than he intended. Until one of the workers noticed him. "You looking for something?" the man asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Kai hesitated. The question was simple, but it landed differently than expected. Looking for something. Was he? He didn't know. But he answered anyway. "Work," he said. The man looked him over briefly. Not judging. Just assessing. "You done this before?" No. A pause. Then a shrug. Pick up that stack. Don't drop it on your foot. That was it. No interview. No background check. No hesitation. Just entry through effort. Kai lifted the first board. It was heavier than expected. He adjusted. Then carried it. And in that moment, small, physical, unremarkable, something inside him began to reassemble. Not confidence. Not purpose. Just movement. And for the first time in a long time, movement felt like direction. The first week at the construction site didn't change Kai's life. It broke it into smaller, more manageable pieces. That was the difference. Nothing suddenly became easier. His body still hurt every morning. His hands still felt unfamiliar holding tools. His sleep was still uneven, often interrupted by thoughts that arrived uninvited in the dark. But something subtle had shifted. His days now had weight again. Not emotional weight. Functional weight. Wake up. Show up. Lift. Carry. Listen. Repeat. The worksite wasn't beautiful. It wasn't inspiring in the way people online described grind culture. It was loud, dusty, repetitive, and honest. Steel, wood, concrete, sweat. No filters. No illusions. And Kai, who had spent months drifting through softness and avoidance, was suddenly inside something solid. At first, he was only assigned simple tasks. Carrying materials. Cleaning tools. Moving debris from one side of the site to another, then back again when needed. He didn't ask questions. That was important. He learned quickly that asking too many questions too early made people think you didn't belong, but staying quiet and consistent did the opposite. It made people notice you without resistance. The foreman, a man in his late 40s with a permanent squint from years of sun exposure, barely spoke to Kai during the first days. But he watched. That mattered more than conversation. Kai noticed it. The way the foreman's eyes tracked effort, not personality. Not attitude. Effort. On the fourth day, something changed slightly. Kai showed up earlier than expected. Not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because sleep had ended early and going back to the apartment felt worse than just starting the day. The foreman nodded once when he saw him. No comment. But it registered. At noon, while others took a break, Kai stayed behind organizing scattered tools. It wasn't assigned. It wasn't required. He just did it because the disorganization bothered him more than the exhaustion. Later that afternoon, the foreman walked past and stopped. "You always like fixing things that aren't yours?" he asked. Kai paused. He didn't know how to answer honestly without sounding strange. So he kept it simple. It was messy. The foreman looked at the neatly arranged tools, then at Kai. That was all. But something in that sound meant acknowledgement. Not approval. Not praise. Recognition. Days became weeks. Kai's body adapted before his mind did. Muscles that had been dormant began to respond. His grip strengthened. His posture adjusted without him noticing. He stopped flinching at physical exhaustion the same way. But mentally, something more complicated was happening. He was starting to notice patterns. Not just in work, but in himself. When he rushed, he made mistakes. When he ignored instructions, he had to redo tasks. When he tried to skip effort, everything became harder later. The feedback was immediate. No delay. No excuses. Reality corrected him instantly. That was new. In his old life, consequences were delayed or abstract. Missed opportunities, rejected applications, lost time, none of it hit in real time. It all accumulated quietly. But here, on the site, reality responded immediately. And Kai began to adjust. Not because he wanted to be better, but because inefficiency hurt. And avoiding pain was something he understood deeply. One afternoon, while lifting a set of heavy planks with another worker, Kai miscalculated his grip. The weight shifted suddenly, slipping dangerously close to dropping. Before he could react fully, the other worker steadied it. "Focus," the man said simply. Not angry. Not harsh. Just factual. Kai nodded. "I was thinking," he admitted. The man gave a short laugh. "Don't do that too much here." That line stayed with Kai longer than expected. Don't think too much here. It wasn't anti-intellectual. It was practical. Focus on what is in front of you. Not what might go wrong. Not what has gone wrong. Not what could have been. Just now. For someone who had spent months trapped in mental loops, that instruction was strangely liberating. The sight didn't allow overthinking. It punished it. Slow reaction times became visible mistakes. Distraction became physical risk. Mental spirals had consequences you could feel in your back, your arms, your hands. So Kai adapted. He started shrinking his attention span. Not in a negative way, but in a focused one. Task. Execute. Move on. Task. Execute. Move on. The simplicity became grounding. Outside of work, life remained quiet. The apartment was still small, still imperfect, still slightly cold at night. But now it wasn't a prison. It was a resting point. A place between efforts. Kai started eating regularly again, not because he suddenly enjoyed food, but because his body demanded fuel for work. He started sleeping deeper, though still not perfectly. And he stopped staring at the ceiling for hours. Because exhaustion now replaced rumination. One evening, after a long shift, Kai sat outside the site on a concrete block, drinking water. The sky was shifting into deep orange. Workers were packing up tools, voices fading into end-of-day fatigue. The foreman sat nearby for the first time. Silence between them for a while. Then, "You got family here?" the foreman asked. Kai shook his head. "Friends?" A pause. "No." The foreman nodded like he expected that answer. "You in school?" Kai hesitated. "No." That answer always used to feel like an explanation. Now it just felt like information. The foreman took a sip from his bottle. "You know what's funny?" he said. Kai glanced over. "Most people think they hit rock bottom when things get loud," the foreman continued. "Loss, fights, breakdowns. But most of the time, it's not loud at all." Kai listened. "It's quiet," the man said. "Like you, sitting somewhere, doing nothing, convincing yourself you're just resting." That sentence didn't feel like advice. "I wasn't resting," Kai finally said. The foreman looked at him. Kai continued, slower now. "I was avoiding." A nod. No judgment. Just acceptance of the word. The sun dipped lower. The site was almost empty now. And Kai realized something sitting there in that fading light. His lowest point hadn't been when he lost his job. Or when money got tight. Or when the apartment felt empty. It had been before all that. When he still had time, options, potential, and still chose not to act. That was the uncomfortable truth. Not failure. Delay. Avoidance disguised as waiting. The foreman stood up, stretching his back. "You'll figure it out," he said casually, as if it didn't need to be deep. Then he walked away. Kai stayed seated, watching the last light disappear behind buildings. For the first time, the phrase, "figure it out," didn't feel like pressure. It felt like permission. Not to be perfect. But to continue. That night, Kai walked home slower than usual. Not tired in the same way anymore. Just aware. Aware that his life was no longer in free fall. It was being built. Roughly. Imperfectly. But intentionally. When he reached his apartment, he didn't collapse immediately. He stood in the middle of the room for a moment. Looking around. Same walls. Same space. But not the same feeling. Something had changed, not outside, but inside the way he interpreted it. This place was no longer the end of something. It was storage. Temporary. Between work and tomorrow. Kai sat down, not on the floor this time, but on the bed. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was disappearing. He felt like he was becoming. Not finished. Not fixed. Just in progress. And that, quietly, was enough.